Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.
This review is for the Ford Custom Off-Road Van by MPC. Now this vintage kit was released as number 813 in 2015, which was the first time it had been seen since the 70s. It's molded in black in 1/20th scale. It's a vintage kit, but they're still available at the usual online sources. Now it has over 200 pieces, and it's molded in white, clear, and clear red with chrome and vinyl tires. It's got a pretty detailed interior with custom camping style conversion parts. Now it's called a HighJacker basically because the term jacked up meant that the suspension was lowered and the body was higher off the ground. And it's set up for off-road use. The body resembles a 1974 Ford Econoline full-size van, and those were all originally two-wheel drive designs, but aftermarketers were able to convert them to four-wheel drive because the bodies and chassis shared many of the F1 truck's components. When you're done, the model is 9.5 inches long, 4 inches wide, and 5 inches high. Now we'll be using Model Masters type liquid cement for most of the construction, occasionally some super glue for fragile parts, and white glue for the window glass. Now remember, follow all the safety and use suggestions from the manufacturers for any of the products that you see or hear used in the review. Here are the decals for the kit. As you can see, they're very colorful. The register is good, and you'll be needing some setting solution to get those large mural decals to set in properly. There's also sponsor decals in case you want to change it into a Baja off-road van. So grab the parts that you see here as construction starts with the motor, and then put the pieces for the basic motor together, the block, the heads, the oil pan intake, and the valve covers, and the cap, timing cover, and paint that the regular Ford motor blue. Now the fuel pump on the timing cover is silver, and then assemble the transmission and paint that aluminum. The exhaust manifolds could be steel, and assemble and paint the air cleaner and paint that flat black. The carburetor is a copper tone, and the oil filter is white. The distributor is aluminum with a black cap. Now the starter can be a medium black and copper wire cover, and the alternator is aluminum. The fan belt and the blade are flat black. Now remember to remove any paint or chrome from any of the places where you want to glue pieces together for good adhesion. And attach the transmission to the back of the block, then add the oil filter and the starter into their locations on the sides. Put the distributor, carb, and air cleaner on the intake there, and then add the exhaust manifolds. Attach the alternator to the belt back and the fan to the front, and install it onto the motor. Now set this unit aside to dry. Assemble these pieces to put the frame together, and then the front suspension can be installed on that. Paint the frame a gold color, and I used a black fine line Sharpie to highlight the wires on the frame. Now assemble the axles and add the spindles in the rear there, and place the gluing ends on the spindle just to allow them to rotate. And then paint that red and paint the shocks whatever color you like. And I did those yellow with steel mounts. Now the springs are painted flat black, and dry brush the coils with some steel color. The sway bar is black, and then the tie rod is steel. Traction bars are flat black. Here's a close-up of the coil springs. You can see the detail there. Now assemble the suspension by adding the springs to the frame, and then add the axles to the springs. And the sway bar then can be added to the tie rod, and then add the traction bars to the shocks last. Next step is that the instructions have you do is the firewall. This just gets assembled with the pieces you see here. Add the battery, the horn, and the master cylinder into place. Paint the firewall flat black, and detail the wires and the highlight parts for a little visual impact. Now, this is totally hidden once you do the assembly, so you can just detail it as much as you like. Now we'll work on the wheel and tire assemblies, and the wheels or the tires were a little bit of a disappointment for this kit. I think they're too small for a 120 scale and for an off-roader, but the aftermarket can take care of that if you wish. Now assemble the rims and tires, and there's two different hubs, so a deep one for the rear and shallower ones for the front. And to give them a worn look, I pressed and rolled the tires, the tread area, on a 220 grit sandpaper that was flat, and then paint the rim backs and hubs silver, and I used some white acrylic paint to dry brush the raised letters on the tires. Now assemble the rim front into the tire and assemble the hub into the rim back without some glue. Then attach the rim back to the tire, and remember there's front and rear hubs, but the tires are non-directional otherwise. Now pull out the pieces for the rear suspension, along with the rear drive shaft, shocks, the cross member, and the fuel tank. Now we'll assemble the rear axle and the springs, and we'll paint that red. And the gas tank and the drive shaft are steel color. The shocks are, in this case, yellow with steel mounts. Transmission mount, or the cross member there, is gold, and then attach the gas tank to the frame. Now put the axle in place and attach the shocks from the frame to the axle. Then add the transmission mount, cross member there, and then stick the drive shaft into the gear housing without some glue. Now we'll go back to the front end here, and we're going to install the motor on the mounts, as well as the transfer case and the radiator. So assemble the transfer case and paint it gunmetal. The drive shaft is steel, and the radiator is flat black with a silver cap. Now the hose is flat black, so install them like this. Install the radiator and then the motor into place, and add the transfer case. Insert the rear drive shaft into the transmission and the front drive shaft to the transfer case and the front gear housing. Now add the radiator hose. And now we'll squeeze the wheel and tire assemblies onto the axles over the hub spindles there in both the front and the rear. Well, we're making good progress, and now we have what's called a rolling chassis on which to build the rest of the vehicle. Now get these parts out of the kit for the steering wheel, and that includes the chrome horn ring, and we're going to paint those the flat black or medium gloss black, and the shift silver is painted silver. Now attach the chrome horn ring to that unit. Now get out the pieces for the seats and clean those up, and then go ahead and assemble the armrests and the seat backs, as well as the pedestal bases. And we're going to paint these your interior color, and I'm using a dark and light tan two-tone scheme, so go ahead and set those aside to dry. Do some work on the interior with these pieces, the gas pedal and the motor cover and the flooring. Now I'll paint the bottom side of the flooring flat black, and use the interior color of your choice. Now the motor cover, it gets painted one of those interior colors, in this case a light tan. And the gas pedal is black, so attach that pedal in place on the floor and then add the motor cover. And now we can go ahead and once those sub-assemblies have dried, we can add the seats to their positions and also the steering column into place. Now it's time to paint the interior panels, and as you can see there's some padded units there that need to be painted separately, so you'll have to mask those off. I start with the lighter color and spray the whole thing, and then go ahead and mask that off, the parts you want to keep, and paint the darker colors after that. So go ahead and get those ready and set those aside to dry. You'll also want to detail the doors with some body color black. We'll decorate some of the interior pieces, and back in the day they made extensive use of fake walnut color coverings and wood itself. So in this case we're going to use the bed and we're going to paint that, the sides wood tone, and the top could be whatever color you want. I used the tan, and then the cabinet sides are wood tone with the top the same. Just pick your color. I did metal type tones to kind of emulate what was available back then. Now look for an appropriate place to mount the bed and the cabinet there with the stove and sink. There's no positive points to put them in. Just scratch off some paint and glue it into place. Here's some real interesting optional equipment for the interior. You see the reel-to-reel tape there, along with some hunting weaponry if you're out in the woods. And you can go ahead and detail those as you see fit or require, or none of those if you don't want them. And now we'll pick out the body pieces you see here, and we're going to be prepping those for paint. The whole van needs to be have a nice light wet sanding with 800 to 1000 grit paper. And then you're going to address any blemishes or mold lines. There's some on there, and you need to scratch those off and sand them smooth. And I found some pretty prominent ones on the rear corners. If you're going to add the roof vent, then you'll need to remove the cutouts that are provided there for that. As you can see, they're pretty nicely done. And if you want, like I said, some fresh air in the back there, you're going to need to install those roof vents. There are also some window vents for the rear windows that you can install on the van. So if you want to use those, you'll have to clean those up, sand the edges nice and smooth. Once the body work is done to your liking, then it's time to give it another sanding and rinse it, and then let it air dry. And use a good quality primer to cover the whole van and the parts inside and out, except of course for the black sections. You'll want to tape those off, mask them off for the doors on the inside. Now, one option is to paint the interior roof at this time to prevent overspray later. With the primer nicely applied and any light sanding you needed to do and blemishes to finish up, then we're going to once again rinse and dry and then paint the base body color on now. And I used a black metallic paint, and the exterior of the body and the doors and the interior of the doors are painted, earlier, as well as the hinges. And once the paint gets cured, the van will be ready for decals. Once again, we'll be using some setting solutions for these huge decals, but also, and more importantly, you're going to want to use a lot of warm water. Once the decal starts to loosen from the backing, you make sure there's lots of warm water on the vehicle in order to be able to position this in place, and then squeeze out with a soft cloth or a cotton swab any trapped water or air bubbles. Then you go ahead and apply your setting solutions, and once it's set pretty well, then you can add the second coat of setting solution to help it fit all the contours on the body. I used some bare metal foil to highlight the trim on this model. You see the windshield here, and that's just like sticky tape that has an aluminum face. You stick it on and you trim off the excess with a nice sharp blade, and use toothpicks, cotton swabs, or an eraser to smooth it into position, and it'll look just like chrome trim. For the windows, I always dip them in some Pledge floor care product. It changes names and packaging all the time, but look for that. Dip it in there and wick off the excess and let it dry, and gives them a nice clear, clean look. I'll use some white glue or micro crystal clear to install the window into place. Now it's a good time to install those skylights and the moonroof. And the frames for those are black and flat black, and they're installed from the inside. And go ahead then and add the glass, and those are glued on with some of the white glue. Now we can work on the dash and detail that for later installation. I painted the interior color for the dash, and then I detailed the instrument panel black with some white air dry brushing to bring out those details, and the brake unit there is a flat black. Now we'll put these interior panels into place. They cover the rear windows, and I painted those flat black and added them to the panels over the window holes, and install the side panels on both sides of the interior. Now add the firewall to the front part of the interior there where it's positioned, and then add the dash brake subassembly to that. Now find these two chrome pieces. These are the interior lighting, and they go onto the roof. You can see the red arrows here that indicate their positions, so scrape off the chrome and glue those into place. Now we'll assemble the doors from these pieces, and the doors have windows that aren't glued in. You're able to open those up when you're done with the model. So set the window into the door and attach the side panels there. And with the side doors, just attach the panels. I used some clips there to hold that tight until the glue dried. Now there's a hinge for each of the sides of the back doors, and that hinge fits into the door slots there. So super glue the hinge back to the body, not the door. Now search the kit for these details. We can add those into the back now, and install the taillight lenses into the bezels with some white glue, and then glue the bezels into the body. And add the backup lights in place, and add a drop of Elmer's glue to create a lens on those to give it a white look. And then add the door handles. You can put the backup lights, like I said, into a nice look, with just a drop of glue. Now we can add the side doors, and well, you see the HighJacker decal was split here. Once that started to set up, you want to make sure there's good separation, but yet they still be aligned. Now there's a hinge for each side, so slide the hinge into the door slots and super glue the back of the hinge to the body, not the door. Now add the door handles to the side door and both front doors. Now we can use these pieces to start detailing the front end. Paint the spotlights aluminum, add the lenses with some white glue, and then add the lenses to the square lights with some Elmer's glue or white crystal clear, and then paint the recessed areas of the grille a flat black. The marker lights are now painted turn signal yellow, and add the headlights with some white glue. The wiper blades are flat black. Now use some super glue for all the attachments there. Add the grille into place, and then add the wipers. And there's no real locating points for the roof lights, so just eye those up and make them symmetrical and put them where you think they look best. Now do some test fitting to install the interior pan into the body of the van. And it slides in pretty easy, but it's a tight fit, so look where that goes, and then scrape some paint and glue that into position. Now attach the chassis to the bottom of the interior pan with the same thing. Scratch some paint where it locates, and use some good strong glue. Now is the appropriate time to install the mirrors and the antenna to the body. Use some super glue for the attachment points, and make sure that they are symmetrical to each other. We'll use these pieces next. That includes the front push bar. So paint the push bar red, and the winch hooks and the lights are aluminum, and use a piece of thread or tie it on one of the hooks, and then stick the thread into the winch hole and super glue that into place. Now install the winch into the push bar, and the extra hook is glued to the side of the push bar. Then install the lenses to the lights, and then attach them to the sides of the push bar. And this is installed as a unit then on the front of the frame. Now we can wrap up the construction by painting the pipes steel and the mufflers an aluminum color. And once those are dry, install them into place on the chassis pan where they are routed. I didn't use all the optional pieces or all of the decals, and you'll have probably some extra pieces left over from your build. So go ahead and put those into the stash for another kit bash. Well, there you have it. This awesome looking, stunning off-road van looks great on the shelf, and you can add some visual impact with some of the frame colors that we chose, or make it more of a subdued and subtle look. Nonetheless, it could use some larger wheels, as I mentioned, but overall it looks really great, and it'll turn some heads. It comes with all kinds of details. For the interior, you can outfit this in a number of different motifs, or as just an off-road vacation unit, or You could even, if you wanted to change some things, make it more of a Baja racer, or even as a hunting van that you'd take up into the Rockies there, because you're fully outfitted for weaponry for big game too. So if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this step-by-step premium quality scale model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon on the lower right of any of our reviews, or you can find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks!